Today we are going to be solving systems of linear inequalities. This is very similar to what we were doing last lesson, where we had to graph a single linear inequality. So today, instead of graphing one on the graph, we're going to have two inequalities on one graph. So there's a few steps that we need to do. So let's go ahead and fill in these boxes. We're going to complete steps 1 through 3 fully, all the way through, for the first inequality in the system. Once you have done all 3 steps, then you are going to repeat the steps for the second inequality. It's important that you finish all 3 steps before moving on. The first step is to graph the points. So we're going to graph our slope and y-intercept, or our x and y-intercept, depending on the graph or the inequality that we have. The second step is to test a point. And if you remember from last week, our point that's best to test is 0, 0. And that's going to help us decide where to shade. And then our third step is to shade. And like I said, once you have done all 3 of those steps, you're going to repeat the steps for the second inequality. And then the last step, it's not really a step, but it's important to know where your solutions are at. And when you have a system of linear inequalities, the double shaded area is the solution. The double shaded area is the solution. And I'll show you what that means when we go through our first example. All right, looking at example 1, we have the inequality y is greater than 2x minus 5, and the inequality 3x plus 4y is less than 12. So we're going to start with our first inequality. And when you're doing these, it's sometimes helpful if you use colored pencils to shade so that you can see where the double shaded area is. Okay, so this one is in slope-intercept form, so I have my y-intercept -5. So I'm going to go on the y-axis. Remember, this is my y-axis. I'm going to go to -5 and put a point. And from there, I'm going to graph my slope. The slope is 2 over 1. So I'm going to go up 2 over 1. Do it a few times. Oops. Do it a few times so that you have a good line to go off of. Okay, and before we connect it, we have to decide if it's solid or dashed. And this symbol is greater than. It does not have the equal to. So that means we are going to have to use a dashed line for this graph. So make sure you pick up your pencil. And then we are on to testing the point 0, 0. So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to plug in 0. 0 is greater than, and remember 2 times 0 cancels out, so we don't worry about that, and we just put -5. And then we ask ourselves, is 0 greater than -5? And that is true. So remember, when it's true, I want to go to 0, and I want to shade that side. So that would be this whole side of the line, because that's where the 0 is. So I'm going to go ahead and shade. This is where it would be good to use color pencil. Okay, let's go to our second one. We have 3x plus 4y is less than 12. So we have to get our x and our y intercepts. And to do that, we are going to divide. So we cover up the 4y, and we're going to take 12 divided by 3. And 12 divided by 3 is 4. So that's my x-intercept, 4. And then I'm going to repeat that process, but I'm going to cover up the x this time. And I have 4y is less than 12, so I'm going to divide by 4 to figure out what the y is. And 12 divided by 4 is 3. Now that I have my two intercepts, I'm going to go ahead and graph them. X-intercept is 4, so on the x-axis, go to 4. My y-intercept is 3, so on the y-axis, I'm going to go to 3. And this one, the inequality is less than. It does not have the equal to, so again, this is going to be dashed. Go ahead and connect it with a dashed line. And then we're on to step 2 for this graph. I'm going to go ahead and erase this so I have room. We plug in 0, 3 times 0 is 0, 4 times 0 is 0. This whole side is 0. And less than 12 is 0, less than 12. That is true. Sometimes I find it helpful when there's two inequalities on the graph to use my ruler as a helper so I know where I'm shading. Because it's true, we want to shade the 0. Okay, and the 0 is right here. And we're looking at the green line on my screen. Okay, so I need to shade the entire side where 0 is all the way to that line. Okay, so now if you notice, we've shaded, so we're on to step 4 where we're trying to find where the solution is. The solution is the double shaded area, so it's where the shading overlaps. In this case, the shading overlaps in this section. Okay, so you could pick any point in that area and it would be a solution to that system of inequalities. I'm going to do one more example with you. We're going to look at this last one. The last one, my y-intercept is positive 1. I'm going to go ahead and graph that. My slope is negative 3 over 1. So I'm going to go down 3, 1, 2, 3 over 1. Do it a couple times. 1, 2, 3 over 1. And in this one, it's also going to be a dashed line. Dashed line, and then I'm going to plug in 0. Is 0 greater than 1? 0 is actually smaller than 1, so this is false. So I don't want to shade this side with 0. I want to shade the opposite side. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to shade this whole area. All right, and then my second inequality, I'm going to start at negative 4. That's my y-intercept. My slope is negative 3 over 1, so down 3 over 1. Get out my ruler to connect it. Again, this one is less than. It does not have that line underneath, so we are going to have a dash line. So I'm going to connect it, dash line. I'm going to plug in 0. Is 0 less than negative 4? 0 is not smaller than a negative, so that is false. And when it's false, we want to shade away from 0. So if the 0 is here, and I'm looking at this line, I want to shade away from 0, which is here. So if you notice, when I shade this, we learned from up above that the solution is in the double shaded area. However, this example, there is no shading that overlaps. So when this happens, there's no shading that overlaps, so the answer is no solution because it has nothing in common. I want you to go ahead and try these next two examples. Pause the video, and when you're ready, go ahead and continue, and the answers will be on the screen so you can check your answers. Now you can go ahead and check your answers to make sure that you have those correct. Here's another problem for you to try, and then again, pause this, and when you're ready, unpause it to check the answer. Here is the answer. Notice the double shaded areas at the top of the graph. I did include some examples of options for solutions. With those solutions, you might have something different. Remember, it can be anything in the double shaded area. Moving on, we are going to be writing the inequalities for each of these systems. So basically the reverse of what we just did with graphing. Now we're going to have to identify our slope and our y-intercept and decide the different inequality symbols that we're going to use to write these inequalities. So we're going to start with the blue line first. I'm going to put a couple points on the graph to make it easier to identify what those points are. We're going to go with these 2 points for the blue. And these 2 points for the green. So go ahead and put those on your graph. We're going to do the blue graph first. And remember, when we're doing these, we have to find the slope and the y-intercept. The y-intercept is easiest to find. What is my y-intercept here? It looks like it is 5. So I know my b value is 5. And then to get the slope, remember, we want to start with the point furthest to the left. So if these are our 2 points, we want to start on the left. And I'm going to count down and over to get to that point. So I count down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Over 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 over 4. And remember, we always ask you to simplify that if you can. 6 over 4 simplifies to 3 over 2. Now we need to decide what our inequality symbol is going to be. So notice the line is dashed. That narrows my options down to greater than and less than because it is a dashed line. Next, I need to decide, is it shaded above the line or below the line? So I'm going to go on the blue line. I always find it easiest when it's a system to go in the area where there's white space. So I'm going to use this section to decide if it's shaded above or below. So if I put my pen on the line and I move it up, notice that area is shaded. If I put my pen on the line and move down, it is not shaded. So remember, when it's shaded above, that means we are using the symbol greater than. And then I can go ahead and write my equation or my inequality. Y is greater than my slope 3 over 2 x plus my b value 5. Now I need to identify the inequality for the green line. I'm going to go ahead and erase this information. We're going to the green line. And I need to find my slope and my y-intercept. My y-intercept here for the green is -1. And again, I need to count my slope from there up and over, up straight and then over. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 over 1, 2. So my slope is 7/2. And then I need to identify what my symbol is going to be. It's a dashed line, so my two options are greater than or less than. And then I decide where is it shaded. Again, use the white space area to help you identify that. Put your pencil on the line. If you move it straight up, it is not shaded. If you move it straight down, it is shaded. And down is below, so it is less than. And now I have enough information to write the inequality. Y is less than 7/2 x minus 1. I'm going to put the points on the graph here, and then I want you to try these next two. With those points, go ahead, pause the video, and then check your answers when you're ready. Here are the answers for these two inequality graphs. You may have them switched around, like you could have number 2 as your number 1. That's totally fine. As long as you have the symbols with the correct numbers, that's what matters. And then on this one, for number 2, you could have, if you went up 2/2, you could have your slope here as 2/2. That's the same thing as 1. So if you have any questions, make sure you ask a neighbor, ask a friend, ask the subs, and hopefully you are understanding.